Have you ever felt like you're just running on autopilot? Living the same day over and over, maybe stuck in a loop you can't quite seem to break free from.
Yeah, that feeling.
It's that feeling where you go through the motions,
Yeah.
right? But nothing fundamentally changes.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, lurking beneath that, there's this question. Do your thoughts, just the things happening inside your own head, actually have the power to shape your future? To, like, create the very reality you experience?
It's definitely more than just a philosophical question, isn't it? It really digs into our own agency. How much of life is conscious choice versus the sort of subconscious programming?
Right.
We often think we're just reacting to the world out there. But what if the deeper truth, and this is what the material we're looking at explores, what if our internal state is fundamentally, well, creating the external world we then react to?
It's exactly the territory we're getting into today.
Yeah.
We're doing a deep dive into some really compelling material that looks at this exact connection.
This powerful link.
Yes. Our source today, it lays out this really intriguing case for how our internal world, everything from our fleeting thoughts to our really deeply ingrained habits, our emotions, isn't just passively reflected in our external reality, but is actively producing it.
Which really forces you to shift focus, doesn't it? Instead of trying to change the outside circumstances directly, maybe look inwards, look at the internal architecture that seems to be, generating those circumstances in the first place.
How do we get stuck?
Yeah, how do we get stuck in those patterns? And maybe even more importantly, how can we leverage our own internal power to genuinely get unstuck?
Well, that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack the core concepts from this material, like the fundamental idea that our personality creates our personal reality. Why breaking old patterns, why initiating change feels so incredibly difficult sometimes.
It really can.
Yeah, and whether the brain is, static, fixed, or if true neurological change is actually possible.
Can you really change your brain?
Exactly. And critically, what this source suggests is the absolute essential first step, that crucial move to break free from the grip of the past and actively start creating a new, different future. We really want to explore how these ideas, which are potentially life-altering, might apply directly in your own daily life.
Right. Think of it like getting a map, not of the external world, though, but of the internal landscape, the one that constructs your perception and experience of that world.
Okay.
And understanding that map, well, that's the first step to maybe navigating it differently.
Okay, let's start unpacking this then. Starting with the foundational principle. The source lays out what we can maybe call the loop of reality.
Okay.
The core premise is incredibly direct, powerful, really. It says the way you consistently think is intimately connected to your future outcomes.
Right.
In some fundamental way, maybe even biologically, your thoughts are creating your reality. Now, I know that might sound a bit abstract, maybe even a little, out there to some.
A little woo-woo.
Yeah, perhaps. But the source actually grounds this idea with some pretty striking statistics about our internal mental activity.
It really does. It highlights the sheer volume, the amount of thought traffic just constantly running in our minds.
It's incredible.
The material points out that the average person thinks something like 60 to 70,000 individual thoughts in a single day.
Wow.
That's an almost constant stream, right?
Yeah.
A nonstop inner dialogue from the moment you wake up until you basically fall asleep.
60 to 70,000 thoughts. I mean, when you pause and actually consider that number, it's astounding the amount of mental energy just being expended every single day.
It really is.
But here's the statistic from the source that just kind of stops you in your tracks. And it's the key, I think, to understanding this loop.
Okay.
Out of those 60 or 70,000 thoughts, a staggering 90% of them are the exact same thoughts you had the day before.
90%.
90%. And probably the day before that and the day before that, just on repeat.
And that relentless repetition, well, that's the engine of the whole cycle described in the material, isn't it?
Exactly.
If we accept that premise that our thoughts are connected to our future, then recycling yesterday's thoughts like that, it just means we're constantly planting the seeds for more of the same.
Right. The source breaks it down into this really clear chain reaction, like a continuous loop. It starts with those repetitive thoughts, right? The same thoughts you habitually think, well, they lead you to make the same choices you made yesterday and the day before. You just default to the familiar.
And making those same comfortable automatic choices, it just naturally leads to the same behaviors.
Yep.
You find yourself doing the same things you always do, acting in the same predictable ways.
And doing those same behaviors, because they are just repetitions of past actions, inevitably creates the same experiences.
Yay.
You end up in the same kinds of situations, interacting in similar ways, seeing the same outcomes play out in your life again and again.
And those same experiences, being basically carbon copies of the past, then produce the same familiar emotions. You feel what you felt yesterday, whether that's, frustration, comfort, anxiety, joy, maybe just resignation.
And here's where the loop closes, with this incredible self-reinforcing power. Those very same familiar emotions then drive the very same thoughts that started the whole cycle in the first place.
It's a feedback loop, a continuous one.
Thoughts lead to choices.
Choices lead to behavior.
Behaviors create experiences.
Experiences produce emotions.
And those emotions fuel the original thoughts. Round and round it goes.
And what's particularly striking about the source's perspective here is how this isn't just presented as, like, a psychological thing.
Right.
It emphasizes that this loop becomes deeply ingrained in our physical being. According to this material, your biology, and it gets specific, it mentions your neural circuitry, your neurochemistry, your neural hormones, even down to your genetic expression. Literally becomes equal to how you habitually think, how you consistently act, and how you repeatedly feel.
Okay, let's pause on that for just a second. That's huge. It's not just that your biology influences your internal state,
Oh.
but that your entire physical system adapts and aligns itself to this repetitive cycle. Like, imagine your body's chemistry, its physical structure, literally becoming a physical manifestation of your past thoughts, actions, feelings.
That's the idea.
The source suggests this constant internal state creates a corresponding external reality because your physical self is literally wired to match that inner world.
Exactly. Your nervous system, your endocrine system, even as it says, down to which genes are being expressed. The source posits that these systems are constantly adjusting. They reflect and perpetuate your dominant state of being, which is shaped by this thought, choice, behavior, experience, emotion loop.
So if you're constantly in a state of stress, maybe frustration because of repetitive thoughts and experiences,
Then your body becomes chemically and structurally wired for stress and frustration. It gets used to it. It expects it.
and this brings us right to the definition of personality that's offered in the material. It's defined really simply.
Yeah.
Just how you think, how you act, and how you feel.
Which, when you combine that with the biological entanglement we were just talking about,
Right.
it leads to this powerful and maybe kind of confronting conclusion from the source. Your personality creates your personal reality.
So if your ingrained personality, built on this endlessly recycling loop, is basically a product of your past, then the reality you're experiencing today is, in large part, simply a reflection and recreation of that past.
Yeah. It's almost like you're projecting your past onto your future.
And this provides such a profound explanation for why change feels so incredibly difficult for so many people. It really does.
Absolutely.
If you want a new or different personal reality, one that isn't just a repeat of yesterday, you can't realistically approach it with the exact same personality, the same thoughts, actions, feelings that created the current one.
You can't use the old map to get to a new destination.
Exactly. According to this perspective, you literally have to begin the process of becoming someone else, someone who thinks differently, chooses differently, acts differently, feels differently.
It shifts the whole focus, the locus of change, really, from trying to manipulate the external world to transforming the internal self.
Okay, so if our personality, which is essentially this embedded loop of thoughts, actions, feelings, is creating our reality, where is all this stored? Where is it maintained?
Well, the source points directly to the brain.
Okay.
It introduces this concept that your brain is much more than just a thinking organ. It's like a physical archive, organized and wired to reflect absolutely everything you know, everything you've learned, everything you've experienced in your life, right up to this very moment.
So it's inherently past-focused.
In a way, yes. It's described as a literal record of the past, an artifact carrying the physical imprint of all your prior interactions, both with your environment and your own internal responses. Your brain, by its nature, tends to be wired for what has been, not necessarily for what could be.
And the source uses this brilliant, universally relatable example to show how this past-oriented brain architecture plays out in our daily lives, how it locks us into these familiar patterns.
Ah, the daily routine example. Yeah, that one's vivid.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it? Walk us through that.
Okay, so it's a scenario most of us can probably immediately recognize in our own lives, right? You wake up, Almost certainly on the same side of the bed you always do.
Habit.
Total habit. You instinctively reach over, shut off the alarm clock, probably using the exact same finger you used yesterday. You shuffle into the bathroom, maybe half asleep, and use the toilet in your usual comfortable way.
Yep. The program is already running on autopilot before the coffee's even kicked in.
Exactly. Then you proceed to get your coffee, likely reaching for your favorite mug, just out of habit.
Mine's the blue one.
Hey. Then you get in the shower, wash yourself in the same routine sequence. Maybe you always start with your left arm, then your right leg, whatever your ingrained unconscious pattern is.
Don't even think about it.
You get dressed, perhaps grabbing the same type of clothes you wore yesterday or tend to wear on this particular day of the week. You get in your car, drive to work, probably taking the identical route you always take, the one that requires almost zero conscious thought.
Navigating the same predictable traffic jams.
Precisely. You arrive at work, interact with the same people who, because of your history with them and all the associated emotional memories, they tend to trigger the same familiar emotional buttons inside you.
Yep.
Then you settle into your workspace, engage in the same tasks you've done countless times, tasks you've memorized so completely you can do them with minimal conscious effort. Efficiently, yes, but predictably.
You've mastered them through sheer repetition.
Absolutely. Then the workday ends. You hurry home, maybe hurry to check your emails, hurry to check social media,
The scroll.
hurry to eat dinner, and finally hurry to bed, only to get up and repeat the whole cycle tomorrow.
It's a day lived almost entirely from a place of unconscious habit and repetition. It sounds exhausting when you lay it out like that.
It does, doesn't it?
And the source poses this really critical question about a day lived like that.
Yeah.
Did your brain change at all that day?
The implication is just so powerful. If you spent the entire day thinking the same thoughts you always think, performing the same unconscious actions you always perform, living by the same familiar emotions you always feel, yet somehow you were expecting your life or your reality to be different from yesterday.
Yeah.
The source suggests you were probably setting yourself up for disappointment because your brain, the actual physical structure processing reality, didn't engage with anything new. It just fired the old familiar circuits, reinforcing the existing structure.
And this ties directly into a fundamental principle from neuroscience that the source brings up. Nerve cells that fire together wire together.
Right, Hebb's law. It's absolutely central to how learning and memory work, and crucially how habits form in the brain.
Okay.
When you consistently repeat the same sequence of thoughts, make the same choices, exhibit the same behaviors, and therefore experience the same outcomes and emotions, you are physically causing the same networks of neurons in your brain to activate together, again and again and again.
And the more often these networks fire together,
the stronger the connections between those neurons become. They literally get more efficiently wired together. This process, according to the source, physically hardwires your brain into what it calls a very finite signature.
a finite signature.
Yeah, essentially a limited set of pathways and responses that correspond directly to your predictable thoughts, actions, and feelings. It's like carving deeper and deeper grooves into a record, you know? The needle's just going to follow the most established path.
That makes sense.
And this wiring principle, well, that's the neurological basis for habit formation. The source highlights some scientific findings suggesting that by, say, the age of 35, many people have largely become a set of memorized behaviors, unconscious habits, automatic emotional reactions, deeply held beliefs, fixed perceptions, ingrained attitudes that function, as the source vividly puts it, just like a computer program running in the background.
The program that dictates so much of their reality without any conscious override.
And the very nature of a well-established habit is just efficiency, isn't it? Born of repetition.
Right.
When you do something over and over like that morning routine, the repetition conditions your body to know how to perform that action or react in that way better and faster than your conscious mind can even process it.
So the body takes over.
Yeah. A habit in this context is when your body knows better than your mind. Your body is literally running the show on automatic.
Think about something like driving your car to a familiar place. You might arrive and realize you don't even remember the last few miles because your body and brain were just on autopilot, following those deeply ingrained motor and navigational patterns.
Perfect example. And the source extends this beyond just physical actions. It includes our emotional and mental habits too.
Okay.
Which is why, according to the source, something like 95% of most people's daily behaviors, attitudes, thoughts, beliefs, emotional reactions, they're operating as these deeply embedded subconscious programs.
95%. That's almost everything.
It's huge. They're running on the familiar tracks laid down by years and years of repetition, driven by a body that has been so thoroughly conditioned, it literally knows the old ways better than a conscious mind trying to forge a new path.
Okay, so if we're largely running on these subconscious programs, hardwired by the past,
Yeah.
seemingly destined to just recreate it, does the source offer any hope? Is there a way out of this loop?
Yeah, can we genuinely change this hardwired brain? Especially if, as the source implies, our biology has literally become equal to our past. Is it, like, too late for someone who's been running these programs for decades?
That's the question, isn't it? Is it too late?
Well, the material offers a very clear and I think quite empowering message. Yes, it is absolutely possible to change.
Okay, good.
And it starts with something fundamental that kind of counters that brain as a record of the past idea. It starts with new information and learning.
Learning.
The source emphasizes that every single time you genuinely learn something new, you are physically changing your brain. You're making new connections, forging new synaptic pathways. That is the process of learning. It's not just abstract knowledge acquisition, it's actual physical change in your neural structure.
It's like building new potential roads in that brain landscape we talked about.
Precisely. Learning is described as forging new synaptic connections. It's physical evidence as a result of your interaction in the environment. The source even calls it the footprints of consciousness.
Footprints of consciousness. I like that.
Yeah, it implies that conscious engagement leaves a physical trace in the brain. Every new piece of information, every new skill, every new perspective you genuinely take in leaves a mark, creating potential new pathways.
And the source actually references some fascinating research, right? Like from Nobel Prize laureate Eric Kandel.
Yes, Kandle's work, often with sea slugs, which have a much simpler nervous system, but the principles apply. It demonstrated that learning just one bit of information could actually double the number of connections between specific neurons.
Double them.
Yeah, increasing them from, say, 1,300 connections to 2,600. That's a significant physical alteration from just a single learning event.
Wow.
It really shows the brain's inherent capacity for neuroplasticity, its ability to change based on new input.
But there's a catch, isn't there? A crucial caveat that the source also highlights from Kandel's work.
There is. If that new information, those new connections, if they aren't reviewed, revisited, practiced, really remembered and integrated, those newly formed circuits prune apart. They can weaken and just disappear in hours or days.
So it's not enough just to learn it once.
Exactly. This distinguishes between fleeting learning and lasting change. Learning is the initial forging of the connections. Remembering, reviewing, applying, that's the process of maintaining and strengthening those connections.
Yeah, okay.
You can expose yourself to new information all day long, but if you don't actively engage with it, reinforce it, those promising new pathways in your brain will just fade away, and the old, deeply wired paths remain dominant.
So passively consuming information isn't enough to build new brain hardware. You have to actively work with it, practice it, remember it.
That's right.
And this leads to the critical element the source introduces for initiating true lasting change, for creating a different future. And that is being defined and driven by a compelling vision of the future instead of remaining defined solely by the memories of the past.
This is presented as the fundamental pivot point, the turning point. If you lack a strong vision, something that's genuinely bigger than you, something you're passionate about achieving or becoming, then by default, your brain and body are just left to operate from the old hardware of the past.
We know where that leads.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as we've seen, that old hardware is expertly wired to just recreate the past, the known, the predictable.
Making your future just a slightly updated version of your history. There's no compelling force pulling you out of the gravitational pull of that past.
Whereas a clear, inspiring vision, in contrast, provides that gravitational pull towards something new.
Okay.
It's described as what gets you out of bed in the morning with energy, with purpose. It's what inspires you into possibility.
I like that.
Without that guiding vision, that destination you're consciously aiming for, you're just left getting up and living from the old hardware, the ingrained habits, the predictable thought patterns, and those old emotions stored in your body.
So you're living from what you've already been and experienced instead of living towards what you could become and create.
Precisely. And the source circles back here to the external environment, powerfully illustrating how it conspires with the brain's past orientation if there's no vision driving you forward.
How so?
Well, the moment you open your eyes and encounter the same familiar cues, You see the same people, go to the same places, do the exact same things at the exact same time.
Your environment is basically flipping switches,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Activating the same old circuits in your brain that are already wired to those specific people, places, and things.
Exactly right. You have existing neurological networks for your spouse, your kids, your boss, your commute route, your favorite coffee mug, your phone.
Mm-hmm.
When your environment provides those same familiar cues, it just triggers those existing strong networks. It causes you to default to thinking thoughts that are equal to everything that you know,
Yeah.
equal to your familiar reality.
Which, if our thoughts are creating our reality, like the source suggests,
And as long as you're thinking in a way that is equal to your current environment, same old patterns, same old triggers, you're simply perpetuating and recreating the same old life.
the environment cues the past.
Your wired brain and body respond with the past.
And your experience remains the past, stuck in the loop.
So the challenge becomes, how do you break free? How do you stop thinking and reacting equal to your environment and instead create something new?
Yeah, oh.
The source gives a very specific, very actionable definition of what true change means in this context.
Okay, what is it?
It states explicitly, to truly change is to think greater than your environment.
Think greater than your environment.
Yes, to think greater than the circumstances in your life, to think greater than the conditions in your world.
Okay, unpack that a bit. What does thinking greater mean practically?
It's about consciously choosing an internal state, your thoughts, your feelings, your perspectives that transcends or rises above your current external circumstances.
So not letting what's happening outside you dictate what's happening inside you.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
cultivating an inner state that anticipates a future reality, even if it doesn't exist yet in your world.
And the source actually connects this powerful idea to some historical figures, right? People who really embodied this.
It does. Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., the Wright brothers, Joan of Arc. These were individuals who dramatically changed their environment, or maybe even the world.
So what do they all have in common, according to this perspective?
They each held a powerful, clear vision, a vision of a future reality that they could not yet perceive with their physical senses.
Right.
They couldn't see it, couldn't smell it, couldn't taste it, couldn't feel it in their current physical environment. The evidence for their vision just wasn't there yet.
But it was powerfully real inside them.
Absolutely. Their vision was so alive in their mind, so emotionally compelling, that they began to live and act as if that future reality was already happening in the present moment.
Wow.
They didn't wait for their environment to change to match their vision. They changed their internal state, their thoughts, choices, behaviors to match their vision first, and thereby started to create that future in their present.
That is the essence of thinking and living greater than your current environment.
That's it.
Okay, this is often the point I find where listeners might be nodding along thinking, yes, vision, got it. Think bigger.
Makes sense conceptually.
Right. But then the practical question hits. How do you actually do this? How do you get past just understanding the idea? How do you get past that crucial first step of implementation, especially when you're up against, 95% subconscious programming?
Yeah, the how-to.
The source addresses this directly. And it issues a kind of warning, actually. It says the moment you truly commit to stopping the same old choices, you must get ready, because it is going to be uncomfortable.
That discomfort, though, isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. That's key.
Okay.
It's presented as a critical sign that you are, in fact, heading towards the new self. You're stepping off the well-worn path of the known past and into uncharted territory.
Right.
The source calls this moment, this conscious decision and departure from the old routine, stepping into the river of change.
Stepping into the river of change. And why is that river uncomfortable? Why isn't it just a smooth, pleasant transition? Feels like it should be if it's positive change.
Well, because, as the source powerfully reminds us, that 95% of who you are is your body operating as the subconscious mind.
Ah, the body again.
Right. Those deeply ingrained habits, emotional responses, automatic behaviors we talked about. Your body has been conditioned over years, maybe decades, to think the old thoughts, feel the old emotions, perform the old actions.
It knows how to do the old way.
Better than your conscious mind knows how to do the new way yet. Your body is physically and chemically wired for the old normal, even if that normal is painful or limiting for you.
Okay, that makes sense.
So when your conscious mind makes that decision to do something different, maybe not react with frustration in traffic, maybe not complain about that colleague, maybe get up earlier to pursue your vision, maybe not reach for that habitual comfort food or distraction. Your body, which is conditioned to the old ways and their associated chemical states, it experiences this as disruption, a threat almost.
Okay.
And it starts sending strong signals back to your brain,
Sure.
trying to pull you back to the familiar,
Yeah.
back to the predictable state it's wired for.
And this is where you start hearing that internal chorus of resistance, those familiar voices of doubt and justification that the source describes.
Exactly. It's the mind, heavily influenced by the body's demand for the familiar chemical state, generating the thoughts that try to talk you out of the new choice.
Like what? What kind of thoughts?
Oh, you might hear variations of, why don't you just start tomorrow? Tomorrow's a better day. You'll feel more ready then.
The classic procrastination.
Totally. Or, this is just too hard for me. I'm just not capable of this kind of change. Or, self-critical thoughts. Something's fundamentally wrong with me. That's why I can't stick to this.
Yeah.
Or thoughts that blame external factors or past events. It's my mother's fault I'm like this. Or, it's my ex-husband's fault. Or, I'm stuck in this situation because of that event that happened years ago.
Basically, any thought that justifies returning to the familiar pattern.
Hmm.
Anything to get back to what feels normal.
Precisely. And the source highlights one specific thought as arguably the most important one to become aware of, because it's the one most directly tied to the body's conditioned state.
Okay, what is it?
This doesn't feel right.
Oh, that one hits home. Yeah. When you're trying something new, stepping outside your comfort zone, even if you know logically it's good for you, it often feels awkward, unnatural,
Yeah.
just not right.
And the source gives this crucial warning about the trap inherent in that feeling and the thoughts that come with it.
What's the trap?
The moment you respond to those resisting thoughts and feelings as if they are true, the moment you believe this is too hard or this doesn't feel right, and consequently stop the new behavior or choice,
Yeah.
you immediately fall right back into the same predictable loop we started with.
Cycle repeats.
Yep. You make the same old choice. Quit, postpone, revert. That leads to the same old behavior. Giving up, doing the familiar, which creates the same old experience. Failure to change, staying stuck, which produces the same old emotion. Disappointment, frustration, self-defeat.
And those emotions then feed the same old thoughts that told you to stop in the first place. See? I told you it wouldn't work.
Exactly. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy driven by the body's insistence on the familiar, and the fundamental reason people fall back, according to the source, is precisely because the old way, the old habit, the old emotion feels right. It feels familiar.
Even if the familiar is miserable or limiting.
Even then, it's known, it's wired, and it feels like home base chemically and neurologically.
So stepping into true change, then, really involves navigating the space of discomfort and unfamiliarity.
It does. It's a significant threshold to cross, moving from the old self, wired to the past, to a new potential self, oriented towards an unknown future. And the source uses some really powerful, evocative language to describe this transition, right? This process of stepping into that void, that uncertainty.
It does. It calls it the biological, the neurological, the chemical, the hormonal, genetic death of the old self.
Wow. The death of the old self. That sounds intense.
It is intense. It's framed as a total system upgrade, and the old system has to, well, it has to cease being the dominant force.
So it makes sense that the old system would resist its own death.
Exactly. It's a profound rewiring, a reprogramming. And it's completely natural, the source suggests, to experience fear or resistance in this unknown space.
Yeah, I can see that.
People will inevitably feel and think, as the source notes, in that unknown, I can't predict my life or my future.
Because the known, even if it's unpleasant, offers that sense of predictability.
Yeah.
Some kind of control, maybe. Safety.
Right. The unknown, by definition, offers none of that initially, and that can feel terrifying.
But the source offers a powerful reframe here, doesn't it?
Mm.
An answer to that fear of the unknown that gets right to the heart of creating your future.
It does. It states, quite beautifully, I think, the best way to predict your future is to create it not from the known, but from the unknown.
Okay, say more about that. Create it from the unknown.
Well, you can't predict a different future by simply repeating the known patterns of the past, right?
Right. The known just leads to more of the same known.
Exactly. The known can only reproduce what has already been. So to create something truly different, something genuinely new, you have to venture beyond the boundaries of what you already know and have experienced. You have to create from the potential that exists only in the unknown.
That space beyond your current habits and programming.
Yes. And this is where the source really brings it all together. It suggests that getting comfortable in this place of the unknown.
Comfortable in the unknown. That sounds paradoxical.
It does. But getting comfortable in that space where the old automatic programs are no longer running the show and the new desired future hasn't yet solidified into a predictable reality, that is where the magic happens.
Okay.
That is where genuine transformative change actually occurs.
And the crucial, maybe challenging, final point from the source is
That magic, that true creation, it never happens in the known.
never in the known.
The familiar, the comfortable, the predictable known past will only ever produce more of the same. The possibility for something genuinely new, for breaking the loop and creating a different reality, resides only in that uncharted, sometimes uncomfortable, territory of the unknown.
It really requires courage then, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Courage to step into that space, to face the discomfort of the body demanding the old familiar programs, to observe the internal voices of doubt and resistance without automatically yielding to them,
Yeah.
and to consciously choose, again and again, to think, act, and feel from a vision of the future rather than from the ingrained memories and emotions of the past.
Okay, so let's just take a moment then to recap this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, exploring some truly insightful material.
We have.
We've explored how our personality, shaped by this persistent loop, thoughts, choices, behaviors, experiences, emotions, doesn't just reflect our reality, but actually physically hardwires our brain and body to create our current experience.
The personality creating the personal reality.
Exactly. We've seen how the brain, by default, acts as this record of the past, constantly reinforced by our daily routines and our environment, potentially locking us into these predictable patterns.
Running those old programs.
Right. But we've also uncovered the profound potential for change that's inherent in learning, how learning physically creates new connections in the brain.
Neuroplasticity in action.
Yes. And the absolutely crucial role of having a compelling vision of the future, something to inspire us, provide the necessary force to override the limitations, and the gravitational pull of the past.
That driving force.
And we learned that true change, according to this source, is defined by thinking and living greater than our current environment.
Transcending the circumstances.
Yes. And we confronted the uncomfortable truth, didn't we? That the essential first step into this change, into that river of change, will inevitably feel awkward. It'll provoke resistance from the body and the old familiar thought patterns.
That discomfort is the signal you're moving.
Right. Yet facing that discomfort, consciously observing and choosing not to respond automatically to those internal voices demanding you fall back into the familiar just because it feels right. That's the necessary path through that void towards the unknown.
And it is precisely in that unknown space, not in the predictable, comfortable known of the past, that you actually possess the power to create your future.
So the source really offers a mechanism for hope here. You have the inherent capacity to learn, to physically wire new connections in your brain. And through conscious effort and vision, you can build a new reality, overriding even those deeply ingrained subconscious programs that are just perpetuating the past.
But the process demands conscious awareness and deliberate action. The blueprint seems clear, but executing it, well, that requires courage. The courage to observe your unconscious patterns without judgment, to consistently make different choices that align with your vision, even when it feels weird, and to step bravely into the uncertainty of creating something truly new, even when, every fiber of your being might be screaming for the comfortable familiarity of yesterday.
Okay, so here is a final thought for you, the listener, to carry forward, something to maybe sit with after this deep dive.
Okay.
If, as this material suggests, the known can only ever recreate the past, and the magic of genuine creation and transformation happens only in the unknown, what small, maybe uncomfortable step into the unknown could you consciously choose to take today, right now, to begin actively creating the future you truly envision?